I should. Nailed it, nailed it. Look what I just nailed. Serious storm ripping across Vancouver Island right now, coming from the west. More bullseyeing the southern tip of the island. There's a bunch of power outage all over the place. Gotta go drive into, do a bit of a road trip. Went by a lake called Cameron Lake, and there's like little hydro tornadoes screaming across that sucker. Definitely watching the trees. It's not so bad down here. This is down a bank. There's an upper bank around there, so it's fairly sheltered right here. So I don't have too much stress from trees bonking me in the head right now. Okay, first thing first, how about the power of prayer? Power of prayer is very real, and you do not have to belong to some kind of denomination or some kind of church. It doesn't matter. The power of prayer, the human mind, is something else. And there is a high chance we prove that here on this channel, right, with Scott and his wife Jerry. Pretty crazy, isn't it? Pretty crazy. Yeah, it's just pretty crazy. What do you say? There's not much to say. You guys sure did something out there. I'll tell you what. It's pretty crazy to hear that word from Scott. Now, before I forget, so today I had to go to a place called. The guys there weren't too worried about talking openly, so I'll say where they were at. I was at a very popular fishing store for more commercial fishing and sport fishing, gearing up the boat for the season, and some fellows there follow this channel. But you know what, just that one road trip today, what is that, about 45-minute drive out and back, and all the places we stopped, we probably bumped into at least 6 or 7 different people that follow this channel. And the amount of people that just come right out forward and talk about this topic now, like without even looking over their back first and whispering, it's pretty good. It's pretty good to see the confidence spreading, right? The confidence spreading and the truth spreading, and people being able to talk normally, not being scared. For me, that's a huge win. But anyway, this is just told to me today. So I was gearing up. One fellow was telling me about a trip to the Grand Canyon, which is pretty cool, and he said that he's got no qualms about this topic, accepts it as fact, and he mentioned that one of his co-workers had an experience. So we're tallying up all the shit that I was buying, and this other fella comes over, and he as well follows the channel, and he told me his experience. Guess where it was? Right behind me. I went to where he had this encounter this winter in the snow, late winter, and I drove down there, made a video for you guys there. I'm not going to go through back the whole library of videos, try to find that one shot, but it's just as the crow flies behind me, where would he have been? He would have been maybe a couple miles up, just a couple miles up that way. So what happens is, if you go behind me across the river, this river snakes around the corner, you go across the river, it goes through a great big swamp. All this land on the right of the swamp is just a big chunk of mature timber. There's nothing in here. And then the other river comes in on the other side of this. And these guys were just upriver on my same side. So you just go down the road here, hang right in the gravel road, head her up. Went through where it's gated, but the gate's open right now. I went in there earlier. He said they had his 2 children, I think. They had 2 kids with him. Friend or relative, I forget. I was just more listening to what went down. And the kids were walking ahead of them. They're coming down to a bank, down a bank, across from a popular steelheading hole, and on the Stamp River, which is it's so popular to have sightings around here. It's absolutely redunculous. And he said that he heard something. He said there's no way anybody was ahead of him. I believe it was wintertime. And he said that he heard somebody or something, or a dog yipping, or some kind of weird yipping up to his left. And he was thinking, holy shit, somebody's dog's around here or something? And they kept on walking, and they had to go down a 15-foot bank to get to the next little flat level before going out to the river. And then he heard something, some kind of weird, somebody's talking. He said, it sounded like somebody's here, you know, and he wanted to get the kids closer, get them closer, not knowing who it was, because it's a little bit remote here on that side of the river. You got to go through a logged off area, old logging road, to get down to the river through the timber. And then he said he heard some kind of weird gibberish talking, like he heard the talking loud and clear right beside him, and he couldn't understand it. And now he says, you know, after watching all his videos, people's explanations about it, he says, you know, it's kind of like whatever everyone refers to as that samurai chatter. And he looked to his left, and boom, there's this thing standing there. He said it just swung to walk away from him and went directly through some bush. Boom, disappeared. And he said it was beige. I'm sure you're watching. I believe he said it was beige, and not as big as what everybody describes normally. And he said he was getting goosebumps while he was telling me. So I would imagine what I would have guessed was it was definitely a big one and a little one talking away. Little one was probably getting shit for being in the path, the visual path of the humans coming, I'll bet you. And off they went, mind their own business, let everybody pass, and that was it. So that happened just up here behind me. And what was it? I've had things thrown at me here, right? You guys caught it. And also I've heard things come out of that timber. I've heard things over here behind me. I think I got them on the camera back in here. And you know as well as I do, the more I come down here throughout the year, you know something's going to happen. I know it is. There's not a doubt in my mind about it. Something else is going to happen, right? I'm not inviting it, I'm not looking for it. But as everybody knows, I share the same places that these beings are frequenting as well. And yeah, I look over my shoulder obviously, quite often, as anybody would, after you've seen one of these beings for yourself, right? It just goes to show you how common it is. I mean, you wouldn't believe how many people, BC Ferries employees have come out to me on the ferry. Hey man, watch your channel, I got a story for you. You know, it's non-stop. It's so common. The big reason why it's not going to be acknowledged publicly is a big, big reason, and it's not dollars. No way. There's no way it's dollars. I am thoroughly convinced that the big reason that we are not formally informed about this from childhood is because of, I have a very suspicious feeling, solid feeling that this truth directly relates to our truth. And our truth would crumble the dirty, filthy bastards who control our society and cause wars and cause food shortages and cause pandemics and cause all the grief. It would strip them of their power instantly. I am 100% convinced of it myself. Anyway, I don't want to babble, I want to talk. I want to talk. I got a recent one in from the Owl Man. Always welcome to hear these emails. And let me mark this as read. And I'm going to share this right away. Keep an eye out behind me. Confirmation of Mr. Ash and Ojibwe Elder knowledge. Steve, hope all is well. I'm sending you this in response to the email from Mr. Ash/Brian, who has recently spoken to an Ojibwe elder on the subject of the Sabe adopting or tagging you. Everything he's spoken of is confirmation of my experience with the Sabe. This is the first email I've heard that explained this phenomena perfectly. I hope this email will be validation for Brian's investment and efforts he has put into the subject. Let me try to further develop this phenomenon as best I can. Now you see how this is working, you guys. I mean, for me, we listen to every single person that comes this way. We listen to them no matter what, right? And eventually the people with above average knowledge of these beings come forward. And then other people with above average and direct knowledge with these beings comes forward, and they're unrelated. and they are very knowledgeable. And then they recognize that it's easy for them to recognize who among us are having those authentic, higher level experiences with these people, and everything clicks. And that's what's going on, right? And that's what's very interesting to me when this starts going down. I hope I just made sense of what I just said. Sometimes my mouth and my brain doesn't really mesh up. I hope I made sense there. So this is exciting for me. The Owl Man is not something I came up with. I'm not a purveyor of wisdom, and I am far removed from many First Nations people. The Owl Man was the name a local Sabes leader gave me long before they knew my given name. It is important to know this because apparently they give you a name long before you're even aware that they have the ability to even think along those lines. I was once told that if the Sabes like or hate you, there will be consequences. I never called myself a researcher. I'm like you, I want to know it all. After seeing one in 2000, I knew immediately our government had to know, and they're willfully keeping us in the dark about it. I want to know why. So, my long journey with the Sabe has given me a greater appreciation for life. After all, is it not a fantastic feeling to know that we as humans have not explained away all the mysteries of life? I mean, our world leaders want us all to obey and believe in science, do they not? All the naysayers in this subject keep screaming they want proof. They will not invest the time needed to discover the truth for themselves. It's actually very easy to do, but honestly they don't have the balls to do what's needed for self-discovery. So here are the consequences of being adopted. I spent about 3 years sitting in a specific spot in a specific woodland, sometimes as much as 4 nights a week. Back in those days I had my own business and I could invest as much time as possible in pursuit of these beings. It was myself and one other person who was more or less my mentor on the Sabe. He discovered them long before myself and had to convince me that not only were they living locally, but were also a type of people. It was within that 3-year time period where the Sabe gave me the name the Owl Man. You'd be surprised how many people get named by them. I'm not the only one. I will wager you, Steve, you have a name. You've been on their radar a very long time. Your name will reflect something about you that they have observed. They all probably know it, considering how much you spend in the wild places all over the place. They will share a mental image of you wherever you show up. It's kind of funny when I think about it. You're pretty rude and blunt with them, so your name probably reflects that. Oh shit, no doubt. No doubt. You know what? I've toned it down quite a bit as I've been learning from all of you, and learning from myself being out in the woods, and when I reflect back on where I've been, how I have been, how I've conducted myself, and acting like a typical scared person does, and especially a scared person who has fought in the past, right? So, yeah, I was pretty rude, pretty blunt, pretty nasty, pretty rude to begin with, but my tone has definitely changed to 100% respect. I'm quite sure they get it, especially after sitting there listening to me read these emails and the words I have to share with these emails, without a doubt. Because as you know, and many of you recognize as well, I don't intentionally pick out, okay, there's Sasquatch sightings over there, I'm going in there. I don't do that. I never do that. I go where I like to go. And it's coincidentally where I like to go is also coincidentally where there's a lot of sightings. And I make a point of me going to those places and enjoying it and respecting it at the same time, no matter what. I'm sure they know that. So maybe my name's changed. Who knows? But it would be interesting to hear my initial name. Alright, here we go. Sorry for the babble. When you sit in a forest at night with no fire or light, you teach yourself what makes the sounds of the night. On a quiet, warm night, you can hear earthworms dragging leaves in their burrows. In early spring, you can hear the collective sound of millions of caterpillars quietly eating new emerged foliage in the tree canopy. It is amazing what you can learn just by being still and quiet. I learned how easy it is to imitate various species of owls and have them come to you. All owls are territorial, and if you can imitate their calls, the owls will seek you out thinking you are another owl invading their territory. It is not uncommon for me to call in any owl species and have a conversation with it, especially the barred owls. The barred owls will come very close to you and really raise a chorus if you imitate them correctly. The Sabe are excellent mimics of just about anything, but they do owl calls as a means to hide themselves, hoping we don't notice. It seems my conversations with the owls was something they liked, were entertained by, and identified with. When the time came where the mind-speak communication showed up, they revealed this name they gave to me. Now here's where the tagged, adopted thing comes in. There's a conversation where I was told this, and I quote, "From now on, no matter where you go, my people will know you as the Owl Man. I have to tell all of you. This was years ago, and what the Sabe's leader told me turned out to be true. After that incident, I can tell where the Sabe are. I can feel or sense their presence, and they will show up if I'm in an area they are living in. I can be driving, minding my own business, and get hit with this energy, or whatever you want to call it. I learned to recognize this. It's very hard to explain. Imagine never learning how to swim as a child, but trying to figure it out as an adult. When you learn as a child, swimming comes naturally as an adult. As an adult, it is a bit more challenging, learning a new skill set you were never exposed to. This whole adoption thing has been a mixed bag of good and bad things. The nasty Sabe will recognize you as well as the kind ones. The other problem. When you carry their signature, everything that hates them will present themselves to you. Dogman, so-called aliens, other things that First Nation people speak of. I've had limited encounters with these other things since. It's not been a big deal for me except the Dogman. They are assholes. As crazy as it sounds, none of this is a big deal to me. The whole paradigm shift of my life was gradual, not causing any mental trauma, a new normal, so to speak. Let me add something to this that hopefully can be confirmed by Brian and his contacts. The Sabe see us as beings of light. We carry an aura on us that they can see. A clan of Sabe can have an aura to itself as well. If you want to understand, they group these auras into these colors: green, blue, gold, and red. These all have meaning. Green represents forests, blue represents water, gold represents respect and nobility. A clan of a forest will cast off green. Clan who live along water will be blue, and clans that are known for respect and leadership will be gold. A clan that casts red. Oh, hold on a minute, let me read this smoothly. A clan that casts red is criminal. Some clans can't identify with all these colors, especially green and blue. This is because they live close to running water, but none of them want anything to do with red. The Sabes can mark, tag, adopt someone with this aura or color, so every Sabe can recognize them as being touched or connected to them. No one wants to be tagged or connected to Sabe who adopt or are cursed with a red aura. You can unknowingly be adopted into any of these. Like I said, if they like or hate you, there are no consequences. If a clan has marked you, any Sabe anywhere will recognize you and have a connection to them. Will recognize you have a connection to them. I get extreme reflection behind me on this. I wish I had the imagination to make this shit up, but sadly I don't. But I can relate. I'm only telling you what the Sabe have spoken of to the best of my ability. It is true they have rules, a lot of rules, but they don't need lawyers and courts to interpret and enforce them. They are rather simple in nature. Do some break these rules? Yes. Like us, they are free agents. They weigh the consequences. If they broke the rules all the time, our government would be forced to tell the public. I mention rules because everyone needs to know the first rule. If you seek them out, they have the right to seek you out. I explain it like this. Draw close to me and I will draw close to you. This is a spiritual law. Kind of funny when you think about all those knuckleheads who head out seeking Bigfoot in large groups with all the equipment and the tree banging. They don't get followed home. If you actually seek the Sabe out with innocent intentions, they will follow you home regardless if you like it or not. I really don't recommend doing so simply because most people can't deal with it. Your mixed bag of emails is proof of that. I see the Sabe as no different than us. I have individuals and clans I try to visit a few times a year. If I'm going to a new area to fish, walk, birdwatch, I always introduce myself when I sense their presence and go about my business as if they were not there. That really is the key to living with them. If I have my wife with me, I introduce her as my woman. Anyone else with me, I introduce my name and relationship and tell them not to be concerned about them. They fall under my responsibility. They respect this sort of thing. You'd be surprised how well they react if you know a little about their culture. It forces them to see you differently. We do need to understand we can live in peace with them. In reality, most people do. They're totally unaware. They are totally unaware they are in their backyard at night. Like I mentioned many times before, even the ones who don't like us avoid us just because they think we are disgusting. Most of us avoid people we find disgusting. We don't want to harm them, we just ignore them and go about our day. There is no way to prevent them from keeping an eye on you or following you around where they live. I tell people not to be terrified of this, just be aware of it. They see you as a threat and are just making sure you behave in a predictable pattern. Most people have a pattern they follow when they're hiking, fishing, etc. They are curious and curious at the same time. If you do something they may find admirable, you may find yourself tagged or not know it, but don't let that mess up your life. Fear is the murderer of our lives. Oh my God, yes it is. It is. Blessings to you and all those who have ears to hear. The Owl Man. Appreciate it, man, as usual. Absolutely appreciate it. And please write back more again, alright, man? As we all grow and learn. And I can tell you, I'll share a little bit of tidbit. So, over, the past 10, 15, whatever years, 16, 18, whatever it is, excuse me, I ran around the coastal mountains of British Columbia solo and remote and far away from the vehicle. For at times up to 2 months straight, every day, in the fall, deer hunting. And there has always been and continually is sightings around these areas where I am, whether it be across the valley, same side of the valley as me, or head of the valley, or at a cross intersection of valleys. And I've always been aware of this. And there's certain patches of timber or the certain parts of the mountain where I just don't go. And I just recently did that. There's a mountain where you typically go shed hunting, and I look for the antlers that fall off in some of these monster bucks that I pursue. Some of these bucks I've followed them for like 4 years at a time, watching them grow, getting pictures of them, and looking for their antlers. And there's this one chunk of mountain, my shed mountain, where I find the sheds, and I can climb up this sucker about 3/4 of the way up to the top, and there's just this barrier. There's just this barrier there that I start to feel uneasy, and I call it the pressure. I feel pressure from up that level and further, and I don't go up there. I don't go past there. And it doesn't make sense because meanwhile I've already gone, 2 miles solo and never been logged before timber up a mountain, right? I mean, there's a fair amount of people that would never even dream of doing that because it freaks them out too much. But I'll go run up there in the dark. I don't give a shit. But all of a sudden, bam, I'm hit with this pressure. I'm not scared. I'm not sensing danger, but it's pressure enough that I'm not going up there. I'm not going up there. And then I'll continue side belting across the mountain, and then I will get to another barrier going that way about a mile and a half, and then I'll get to just it's almost like this line in that timber where I don't go, and I still have never gone in probably 15 years. I feel the pressure. And then directly across the valley is where I videotaped those bright lights way the hell up there, and it was minus 15. And directly across from here, I found a footprint, and as well I heard a bellowing, yelling, human-like voice, but not a human, way up top on the other side of the valley, directly across from there. And then just recently, 2 years ago, I think I already shared this, we'll share it again. There's this one monster buck, and I mean a freaking monster, and I watched him grow for 5 years. Maybe they possibly admired the fact that I let the majority of the deer live, and I rarely shoot one. And I let them live and live until they're past their prime. Maybe that's why I got the respect, I don't know. But they left me alone for the most part. Yeah, and this one main trail that I walk through the timber, way up there where nobody is, and I've had trail cameras there for probably 15 years straight, and I've never had a human being on these cameras, ever. And I'm walking on the trail, and I already went down the trail. I mean, we're talking a major trail is also used the same time as a migration trail. So you can imagine the substantial, the wear of this trail, and it's never been logged. So this trail has been there since time began, basically, with deer. So I'm coming back, and I've always just dreamt about finding the shed antler of this monster buck. I'm like, come on, just let me at least find one of his antlers. And boom, one of his antlers is blatantly laying there in the middle of the trail. And it was shed possibly 2 years earlier. So it's an old shed. And there is no effing way in hell that antler was sitting on that trail when I walked by, and it wasn't there the year before or before that. There's no way. And I was instantly, I'm like, you start looking around, right? It's like, oh, all right, and there's the shed, you know. And I grabbed it, took it home. They probably watched me take it. And a lot of people out there watching this video are going to probably think I'm an absolute kook for even entertaining the idea that something put it there for me. I'll guarantee you, no coyote did it, no wolf did it. And it was placed there. It was placed there. It was not a slope or any grove. It was placed in the middle of that damn trail after I walked up the trail and came back. So there you go. It kind of somewhat relates to what the Owl Man just shared with us, in a way. And then there's other places that I go where I just don't go there anymore. You know, like where I was intentionally seeking these things out, and where I had the stand in the swamp. And the stand... I thought I heard a voice. And then the stand in the swamp from that particular area I'm talking about is about 60 kilometers away from there. 60, 65, maybe, yeah, 70. Now it's around 70, 75 kilometers farther away from this particular spot, which is where we had that stand in the swamp and where it was torn down. Where I had that grizzly bear jump up and try to get that meat off the line I put up last spring. So I'm just saying there's other places where the pressure is too much for me. I don't like it. I don't like that feeling, and that's as well where the knocking was above me here and the knocking was above there when I was trapping wolves in there. Never went back until I took you guys back there with me, right? I think I might have went there one time before I took you guys in there, and that's it. It's interesting, right? But it is interesting, especially the pressure. I've felt that pressure in numerous places around this province. I haven't felt it in the Yukon ever. I haven't felt it in the southern states. But I have felt it around British Columbia in more than a handful of places. You just feel it. I can't really. I call it pressure. It's just a pressure of. It's like a going down a trail, and all of a sudden the hairs in your ear, or the hairs on the side of your head, your ear, your sinuses. I don't know what it is, but you can just feel that pressure coming from that frickin' side of the mountain, or that patch of timber, or whatever. I felt a little bit of pressure here off to this side a few times so far, but there you go. Enough babbling, right? Let's get some more people heard. It's an interesting thing. Now, these are all recent, by the way. All these ones. Hold on a minute. This is titled The Straight Story. I think some of these could even be emailed in today. It's just in a rush, and it's easy to grab a handful out of the top of the emails that I'm saving them, and read them, and know that they're not being reread. And I'm running out of time. We're getting stuff ready to go hit the coast. It's titled The Straight Story. Hey Steve, the reason I titled this The Straight Story is just because I'm going to try and not hold back or censor myself when talking about what has happened in it. What I've been told, what I figured out, and come to believe. That is perfect. That's what we encourage here. I guess I officially entered the Club of No Return back in '97 after being hit with intense fear and dread when I tried to get out of the vehicle at the start of bow season in woods near my home, and early next year while it was still chilly here in Oklahoma. I mother and I took a walk in the woods not far from where I tried to hunt the previous season. My mother was raised as a tomboy during the Great Depression, and her beliefs, which influenced me greatly, she learned from my grandmother and grandfather. My grandmother was a Choctaw, and my grandfather was part Cherokee, and what we call a water witch around here. It just means he could take branches and douse the location of a big well where there's water. Seeing that, I got a few friends to do that, and it works for underground cables and lines. It just means he could take branches and douse the location to dig a well where there's water. She taught me a lot about wild plants and not a little about how to hunt, which I did for my early teen years. Early that year in '97, I parked the car at the edge of the woods near a ravine, and my mother and I and her little dog walked up into the woods on the other side of the ravine. My mother told me she needed to answer the call to nature, so I went and sat down with my back to a tree to give her privacy, while she proceeded a little ways down the hill into the ravine a ways. I heard a couple of strange high-pitched calls that I thought of as almost being like whistling calls coming from a couple different directions, as I said, up against the tree. When my mother approached me more quickly than I expected, she said there's somebody standing by the car. Where my mother stood on the side of the hill, she could see across the ravine in the car where we had parked it near the edge of the ravine. I looked to where she told me to, and I could see the car, and since there was a cedar tree near that... Sorry, did you hear that? I think it was a gun. I don't know what the hell that was. I looked at where she told me to and could see the car, and since there was a cedar tree near that, I asked her if she could still see the person there. Not saying that I doubted my mother's ability to tell the difference between a cedar tree and a person. I was just trying to understand what was happening and eliminate any confusion I could. She said, no, they're not there now. I suggested we go back, and she agreed. I'm going to go through this next part quickly for brevity. Basically, we went down the hill in the woods where the ravine opened out and started up a dirt road that went back up the hill on the other side of the ravine, where the car was parked. The being hit us with a wall of smell. I knew it was there by the bushes next to the parked car and my mom's passenger side car door. Long story short, I fired a couple of shells in the air, heard it run across the clearing where the car was parked, and leapt down to the shelf below the edge of the ravine in the direction we were at when my mother saw it standing by the car. It sounded like throwing 10-pound rocks in the ground every time its foot hit the ground, followed by a pause, then a heavy thump. The dog was going apeshit. Fortunately, I kept my mother occupied, I hope, so that she didn't have to think too much about what was happening. Anyway, I believed it wasn't next to the car door anymore, and we went and got in the vehicle. And I could hear it over there at the edge of the ravine about 20 yards away chattering at me. I don't mean chattering like a chipmunk unless you consider perhaps what a chipmunk would sound like if it weighed 800 pounds. The vocalizing it was making had a huge set of lungs behind it. This all happened about sunset, and by the time we got home it was dark, and I asked my mother to describe to me what she saw. So she drew me a basic sketch. She said it was standing by the driver's side car door and facing towards her with the sunlight behind it from the setting sun. And she could tell that it had auburn-colored hair because the reddish highlights in its hair. Since she said it was by the car, I got a tape measure and started running the tape up in the air next to the car door. While she stood there on the front of the porch, I asked her to tell me when the tape reached the height of the top of its head. She did, and I measured from that point to the ground, and it was 7.5 feet. It was covered in hair, had a pointed skull, and I never saw it. I trusted my mother, she was no fool. So now I knew what had been following me around down in those woods for the past couple of years, occasionally throwing a rock through the trees. I knew something was following me because I could feel it. And once I stopped in an open area in the dry creek bed, I just stood still and listened for about 5 or 10 minutes, like I've learned to do when hunting game. And when I first moved, something large took off on each side of the creek. Neither were more than 10 or 15 yards away from me in the brush. Never saw anything then either. Once when hunting with a friend, I could hear something running through the meadow I was standing in, which had about 2 feet of tall grass. When I followed the sound to where the grass stopped and the trees began with nothing but leaves on the ground, there was nothing there. So I put all that together and realized why my hunting woods was creeping me out so much. It shook me up pretty good. I said I wasn't going to leave anything out, or at least I'm going to try not to. So I'll tell you. The next day, my mother was washing dishes in the late morning and turned around and saw the back of the Sasquatch walking out of sight in the living room. My mother knew it wasn't flesh and blood, and she knew what spirits were. And by that point in my life, so did I. But those are other very long stories. I believe / hope what my mother saw was an astral projection. I think it was just a year or two ago, after my mother's sighting, that I was squirrel hunting at a different location a few miles away and couldn't relax to sit down and wait for the game to come out because of an intense feeling of being watched and a sense of danger. So I decided to end my hunt and start walking out, passing the dam of a pond on my way back to the vehicle, and felt that feeling of being watched again. I turned around and looked back towards the pond. On the other side of the pond was something that was dirty white or cream color, as big or bigger than a cow, moving on all fours with the grace and the fluid motion of a cat. I kept staring at it as it walked away into the trees, trying to focus my eyes and make out its shape. Make out what I was seeing, because I couldn't tell what it was. One thing was certain, it was not a cow, or any other lumbering beast. It moved like a predator. I know what it was now, as I did after giving it some thought back then, and also reading an account of one with a similar coloration just a few miles away, crossing the road in front of some bobcat hunters. But none of this is when these types of events all started. I should have mentioned earlier that my name is James Hancock. I'm currently 56 years old and living on the same property that we lived on since 1973 here in a small town. And my property is about a block away from where the woods begin at the edge of town. I heard you say in one of your videos, I think something to the effect of some strange things go on in places like Oklahoma. Brother, you have no idea. And a lot of people around here have seen these beings, but most of them just keep their mouths shut. And I think others are just in denial. Denial is something like I don't feel that I have the option of, because this sort of thing has been occurring all my life. What I haven't mentioned yet is the Sasquatch by the pond wasn't the first one I saw, but I'll come back to that. You know how people think it's almost like they're being followed or haunted by their repeated experiences? I know that a lot of these idiots that call themselves researchers will call a lot of people a liar if they say they've seen a Sasquatch more than once. They seem to reason that it's such a rare occurrence that there's no reason to believe that someone would actually see one more than once, or some such shit. I can see how that would cause a lot of people that have had experiences, repeated experiences like I've had, try and keep a low profile. They're not saying much, but I'm writing you, trying to share with other people that are dealing with their experiences, especially if they feel like they can't escape it because it keeps happening to them. Sometimes I wonder if a lot of people have the same types of repeated experiences but don't acknowledge it and stay in denial, like they're going through life with a set of blinders on. Sometimes the truth really sucks, and the hardest thing to do is to acknowledge it, rather than trying to stick your head down in the sand. My mother told me several times how back before my grandfather died when I was 3 years old, how we had went camping on a lake down in Texas. My mother, my half-brother, and I were sleeping in a tent while my father and grandfather laid out on some concrete picnic tables. Not long after dark, my grandfather told my father, in a no-nonsense tone, to get us kids and Mama in the car. We're leaving right now. My father, an ex-Marine, didn't argue and did what he was told. They just threw the tent and all the camping equipment in the back seat, and us kids and my mom climbed in on top of it, and my father drove us out of there. My grandfather kept looking out the rear window, and when I asked my father what happened, my grandfather replied, "We were surrounded, and I don't think they were human." Now, my grandfather taught my mother how to hunt, and one of the things that he taught her and my mother passed on to me is that there are things out there that your gun won't protect you from. And the way he put it, He said, just keep your feelers out and stay aware of what's going on around you. I think people in the old days, country people anyway, had not lost their intuitive abilities the way people who stayed glued to their screens have nowadays. Or at least know to pay attention to it rather than trying to explain what their intuition is telling them. It's just their imagination. I know when I spend more time in the woods, my senses have sharpened. My father became disabled about that time when he passed out at work and found out that he had a brain tumor. Fuck, not another one. This is 1970, and they didn't have great medicine for that sort of thing, but they managed to remove it without killing him. But my father was gone. At least the man that I respected and loved as a child was gone, as he was left mentally disabled, with a bad temper and the temperament of a toddler. That's sad and sad to hear that. We were living in Texas at the time of my father's surgery, and one of my father's stepdaughters, he had been married many times, talked him and my mother into moving up near her in Oklahoma. So we moved to Oklahoma and rented a bungalow house way out in the country, which we lived in for about a year. That ended when my father came home one day and told my mother that he had bought a house in town and he didn't want to be too far from the store to buy beer. However, while we were there, something kind of strange happened, and something very strange happened. The first was, on the only night I remember my mother spending away from the house during the year we lived in that rented house, I remember sitting at the kitchen table eating dinner with my father and my older half-sibling, listening to some strange animal cries or moans. Not far outside the house. That was a shotgun. I remembered it made my flesh crawl. I might have disregarded that, I guess, but one hot summer afternoon when all the doors and windows of the house were open because we didn't have air conditioning, all four of us were in the living room watching TV. My mother and I were sitting back behind my father and half-brother with the kitchen to our left and open front door behind us. When what my mother described as a ball of fire, I didn't get a good look at it, I just saw it as a flash of color go by. It came in through the open kitchen window, did a starboard turn into the bedroom, and out through the front door. It was about the size of a softball and kind of a yellowish orange, as I recall. I found out a lot of people have seen something similar rising up out of the trees at night around here over the years. I've come to believe that it is a forest being, taking on another form for some reason. Maybe to travel, I don't know. But I know there are a lot of these balls of fire seen in areas that the forest people / Save / Sasquatch are seen. I also believe that we have what they call dogmen around here. I might not have bothered mentioning that, but put some fishermen a few years back about 10 to 15 miles as the crow flies from where I am, saw a huge wolf-like creature standing on all fours that stood up on two legs. When it did it, there was all kinds of snapping and popping sounds. That same description will fit what I've heard a couple of times down in those woods as I mentioned earlier. Which also reminds me how my mother had a vision when I had started considering hunting those particular woods instead of driving further away from home, and she told me not to. She said she saw something down there that was black and had large teeth, and if I went down there it would kill me. The only reason I went hunting there later is because I asked her if she still felt it was unsafe, and she said she thought it was gone. She couldn't see it anymore. I know this sounds crazy to a lot of people. To those people I say, get over it. If you want to learn to develop your sixth sense, you better start listening to what the old people have to say. I hope this isn't too boring or long-winded, Steve, but I'm just trying to give you the straight story. As I said, we moved to the property that I now live on, which is still a block away from where the woods begin. They used to stretch unbroken all the way down the lake where my mother saw the being standing by the car. And the woods are still pretty dense, with only a few places where the trees have been replaced by a stretch of pasture. I'm living on the second house that's been on this property, which was constructed in 91. Back in 78, we're still living in the old house. Also, that was when we had a spate of sightings around here, or at least that's what I heard at the time. I spoke to someone who had one of these experiences in the 70s that had been told by someone else of their experience of seeing one crossing the road. But I remember when I was 11 years old, there was a night that I didn't cool down, and it was hot. For some reason, about 10 or 11 that night, I I just started thinking about the settings that people were talking about. And for some reason, the idea just pops in my head. If I go look out the bedroom window, I wonder if I would see one. You can probably tell where this is going. The bed lay up against that window, and so I laid down on the bed and pulled the curtains back. There's a street light about 2 houses down the road, and there was an old cedar tree, trimmed up so folks could walk under it. And the old man that lived next door had his pickup parked in the driveway by it. Some old short step side from the 50s. That pickup and whatever was leaning over it, over the bed of the pickup, like it was looking for something in the pickup bed, was backlighted by that street light. At one point it raised up its arm and I could see long stringy hair hanging down. I wasn't scared, but I was having a hard time accepting what I was seeing. So I just stood there and watched it. It never moved except for maybe swaying and raising its arm up like that. Almost like it was trying to show me the hair on its arms. Imagine it was looking straight at me at the same time. And for some reason, after watching it for a while, and it not moving, I just closed the curtain. I looked again later, as I recall, and I didn't see anything standing there then, just an old pickup. I even went so far the next day as to ask the old man if he had ever went out to his pickup last night, or anybody had been in it. To which he said, no, nobody went outside after 8 p.m. I only recently realized that while my mother and I both have seen a Sasquatch, what are the odds that both times, both beings, heck, for all I know, could be the same one, were backlighted? As I recall, a few months later, I was in the hospital with a pancreatitis as a complication to contracting the mumps. When my pancreas shut down, the pain was so intense that I passed out in the elevator and was delirious for 3 days. The doctor told my mother that if they wanted to call any family, they needed to do it now. I survived, but every time I hear a story after someone has a close encounter, followed by an intense illness, I think of that. My mother feared them for the rest of her life. For years, she kept having nightmares of me and her being out in the woods camping or something and seeing a Sasquatch coming. And as we're trying to get away, she said she could hear them speaking to her in her mind, asking her to wait. Like I said, I take that stuff seriously. My mother did have one dream of being woken up by a female Sasquatch after me and her had sit down up against some trees and fell asleep. She said the Sasquatch spoke to her in her mind and told her that me and her need to get up and leave, that there are some other of her people that don't like our people and they're coming. I thought that was an unusual dream, even compared to the others. But later I was shown a different area in the woods that I thought was pretty interesting. It's an area that's no longer accessible now, but was by truck at the time. The first time we were out driving around, I started down that way, and my mom said she had a bad feeling and told me to turn around, which I did. Unfortunately, I am at times an asshole, and another time we were driving around, I tried to talk her into letting me drive down there again, to which she reluctantly said okay. And just as we came down to the end of the road where I wanted to show her the cool geography, I asked her if she felt like getting out, and she firmly told me no. She said she could see the trees that we fell asleep against where the Sasquatch woke her up and told us to leave. We left immediately. As I went through life, trying to put the pieces together and try to gain some kind of understanding of the strange of the experiences that are part of my life, what I come to believe is that the world is a lot stranger and more complex than most folks seem to realize. I've come to believe that the things like portals and other worlds exist, and that flesh and blood beings live out in the wilderness right next to us and can probably change shape, influence, and or communicate with us telepathically. And by using that same ability, because what is telepathy if it's not two separate nervous systems becoming linked? They can make us feel fear, feel so tired in the middle of the day that we just want to lay down in the middle of the trail and go to sleep, or have sudden diarrhea. They confuse our minds to keep us from perceiving them, even when they are right in front of us. I know a lot of people believe they're monsters, and a lot of people believe they're generous, kind, and friendly. What I believe is that they are people, and like us, they can be monsters, they can be pranksters, they can be killers, and they can be good Samaritans. But just like anybody you meet on the street, it's safer to not always assume the best. Just hope for it. But I'm just referring to the Sasquatch, and we both know there's a lot more out there than just the Sasquatch. Well, Steve, in case I didn't mention earlier, you can go ahead and use my name. Also, I want to tell you what prompted me to write this email that I've been considering doing for some time. I've been watching your channel since you first started telling your own encounters with these beings and sharing the encounters of others. I haven't caught every video, but like many others, I appreciate the work you're doing and hope you continue to do so. People need a place that's safe to share, especially one that might make another person feel like they're not alone or crazy because somebody else had a similar things happen to them too. What I wanted to mention is that I started to watch one of your videos this evening, the one that started out where you were relating warnings about spiritual adoption by the forest beings. I immediately perked up and was very interested, which I guess you can figure with my history that I just related to you. But I had to stop the video because the air started getting heavy and I started feeling like I was watched. Wow. What I believe is that the subject matter not only got my attention, but something else's as well. This is not a new thing for me, but it was uncomfortable and a bit scary. So I turned off the video, asked to be left in peace, and at a later time I will circle back and watch that video. Anyway, I hope this helps someone. Take care. P.S. I wrote this using voice dictation, but I went back over it and tried to correct any spelling mistakes or word substitutions, but it's possible I might have missed some. You did great. It's me. It's me. You know what? The savvy probably called me the butcher for my reading skills. But I mean, that was a long one, right? And I was kind of babbling along, but like I said, I explained to you guys earlier, when I feel something gets my attention somewhere, part of my attention goes that direction and it stays there the whole time I'm reading, so it can make me stumble. I heard 2 shotgun shots downriver, but on the same side of river as us, and I felt a little bit of pressure from over here in the beginning. So that combines up with me screwing up. But I hope I read that smooth enough, man. And I really, really appreciate all that time you just took to write that out and send it in. Big time. And I'm glad that the emails from other people like the Owl Man and others, Brian Stiham, and many other people they're all starting to mesh up together, right? They're all starting to mesh up together, which they should, because this is all truth and fact. So if you have truth and fact coming from numerous different directions, it's going to eventually mesh up, which it is, right? Anyway, what's going on behind me? Anybody see a bear yet? Anybody seeing some of the sockeye jumping behind me? It's windy, it's chilly, it's getting a little late. Now I gotta go home and have some dinner. I promised I'd only be an hour or so. And tomorrow I'm gonna pack up. Sarah gets off work, throw her in the truck, and off we go for a couple hours of logging road travel. The river's too screwed up, otherwise I was gonna make her put on the waders I bought her, and I was going to really try hard to hook her into a steelhead so she can understand the excitement, right? Because when you're a new angler, like she's caught a lot of salmon and halibut with me, and she's had a ball doing it, but when you have a new angler that started off doing that and doesn't have a clue about the river fishing and doesn't really have a clue about the steelhead, and you come home bouncing around like a 7-year-old kid on frickin' Christmas Day after hooking into a handful of them, and better yet, getting video of them, and you're showing you're all excited, and poor thing, she's kind of excited for me, but doesn't quite get it. So, hopefully, one day that damn river's going to get low enough that I can stuff her in that riffle there, and hopefully guide her hook, explain to her where to put her hook, and hopefully we can get her to hooked into a steelhead and scare the shit out of her, right? Because there's nothing like 12 volts through your spine through the end of a fishing rod standing in a river. Anyway, here we go. By the time you guys watch this, we're probably already out there getting the boat ready and geared up. And then we'll start getting a lot of you people on the boat with me and talking and fishing. Back shortly.